We adults have this sort of boring way about us where we think we know everything and we stop seeking, we stop learning, and it's really ridiculous because there's so much. We will die having known so very little if you think about the vastness of the world. That I just try to impress upon kids to stay curious, hold on to that curiosity for your entire life, because even as you get older and you start figuring things out, there's still so much to discover about different people, different cultures, different places, different parts of nature. The entire world is just full of impossibilities, that I just find myself as an adult just finding new things to obsess over all the time. That's why I love drawing stories and writing stories about kids, is because they're living in that very powerful time of life where they want to find out things, they want to discover things, and it changes them as a person as they do it.
Hey everyone, I'm Bianca Schulze, founder of the Children's Book Review, and this is the Growing Readers Podcast. Today, I'm so pleased to be joined by Caldecott Medal-winning author and illustrator Matthew Cordell. Matthew Cordell has illustrated many books for children, including works of poetry, novels, and picture books, including The Only Fish in the Sea and Follow That Frog, both by Philip Stead. He's also written and illustrated numerous picture books of his own, including Hello Neighbor, The Kind and Caring World of Mr. Rogers, Bear Island, and Wish. His work has been published around the globe in many languages, including Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Spanish, French, and Italian. Matthew's books have been recognized as Best of the Year selections by the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Boston Globe, and his first wordless picture book, Wolf in the Snow, was awarded a 2017 Boston Globe Hornbook Honor and the 2018 Caldecott Medal. Matthew lives in suburban Chicago with his wife, author Julie Halpern, and their 2 children. Today we're talking about his newest book, 102, a cozy, topsy-turvy nighttime adventure. And what makes this book especially remarkable is how it was made. The entire thing was illustrated using a single-scented, multicolored ballpoint pen that Matthew found in his kids' art supply stash. A wildly unconventional choice for an artist so closely associated with pen ink and watercolor. It's a real pleasure to welcome Matt back to the show. But before we get into it, here's the synopsis for 102. From Caldecott medalist Matthew Cordell comes a cozy, magical nighttime adventure where a child discovers the mysterious, miniature world beyond his bedroom walls. Sent home from school earlier in the day with a fever, George awakens in the middle of the night to discover a cricket beckoning him on an adventure and soon finds himself shrunken down in size. He follows the insect guide through a crack in his bedroom wall, through the moonlit yard, and into the home of a family of mice at the base of an oak tree. There, in a tiny, cozy kitchen, George discovers the meaning of his quest. He must help the mama mouse complete her special 102 bean soup for her sick young son. Delightfully sweet as it is fantastic, 102 seamlessly explores the values of curiosity, kindness, and generosity. The simple yet profound conclusion shares a clever wink with readers, encouraging them to believe the unbelievable. Hi, Matt. Welcome back to the Growing Readers Podcast.
Hi, Bianca. Thanks for having me.
An absolute pleasure. So I am hoping we can start off with some fun rapid-fire questions. Are you good with that?
Yeah, sounds fun.
All right. First answer that pops into your mind. So the last book you read that wasn't your own?
I'm actually reading for the first time Watership Down. I've never read that novel, and been curious about it for a long time, so that's what I'm currently reading.
a living children's book creator whose work you greatly admire.
Quentin Blake.
Soup or sandwich? What's your go-to when you're sick?
Soup.
If you shrank down to mouse size right now, what's the first place in your house you'd want to go explore?
That's a good question. Definitely, probably sort of inside the walls of maybe the kitchen. I don't know. I just feel like there might be some cool stuff back there that got lodged in there, or it's maybe cool or kind of gross stuff under the appliances. It would be kind of interesting to find.
I'm seeing kind of lots of cobwebs as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is there anything that you've recently found yourself feeling curious about that you want to learn more about?
I'm always very curious about the outside world, the natural world. I'm really into birds, so there's always different birds I want to find out more about them. I'm really kind of obsessed with owls in particular, so I'd love to go explore some different states and see some different types of species of owls that we don't have here. So I'd love to do that at some point.
I recently just had to move my mom from her apartment that she's lived in for a really, really long time. And the things that she had saved from me was really fun to go through. But I came across this photograph that I had forgotten about where I was on a back porch in Australia with a group of friends. Somebody was playing guitar. We were all sitting around, and this tawny frogmouth owl. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those.
Yeah.
It literally flew up to us and it was sitting on us. And I have the photograph as evidence. And just bizarre. I'm wondering if it was like sick or something. I don't know. But when does an owl ever just fly up to a group of people and actually start sitting on them?
That bird, it could have been a young bird, because I know young birds they have less inhibitions and they're more curious about everything. So younger owls will tend to fly like right over my head sometimes, or come, perch a little bit closer and just kind of check me out. Their heads are like moving around like this. It's pretty crazy, but it could have been something like that. But I'd love to see that picture if you have it handy, email it to me after this.
Yeah, I will. I'll dig it out of the box I carried all the way back from Australia. So I will find it and I'll send it to you.
Awesome.
All right, last rapid fire. Pen, pencil, or paintbrush? Your grab and go tool if you had 60 seconds to draw something right now.
Yeah, that one's easy. Definitely pen for me. I love drawing.
Awesome. All right. Well, Matt, last time we talked, you told me you're mostly self-taught in pen and ink and watercolor. So no specific formal training, just mostly trial and error. So when you found a scented, multicolored ballpoint pen in your kids' I think, art stash or in their bedroom. Was it that sort of same, let's see what happens instinct at work? Or did it sort of become an accident that became a dare to create this whole book, 102, in this, ballpoint pen?
Yeah, I think I just was playing with it in my sketchbook at first. And because it has 10 colors in one pen, I usually just draw in black ink and then I color with watercolor. That's been my process for years and years. But because this pen has so many colors, I didn't need to use anything else. I could do a full color drawing with this one pen. So I think when I was first playing with it, I was maybe drawing things in individual colors. For instance, an apple, I would draw it in the red ink, or the grass of the outside, I would draw the grass in green. And then I started overlaying with lines with this pen, and it became a very different effect. You can sort of blend colors just by overlapping the lines. So if you were to overlap the lines of yellow, just by drawing, interlaced lines, and then you drew on top of that with blue, you would suddenly have green. on your paper. I draw a lot of birds. As I mentioned, I'm a birder. So I draw a lot of birds in my sketchbook. It's just kind of a thing I do for relaxation, for fun. And I was drawing owls at first, and I was just drawing them using this pen over. And it was like, I would draw like a great horned owl, but I would use yellow and blue and green and orange and all these different colors, overlapping. And it sort of, by the time you finish, you have a fully realized, fully colored picture. But because they're all lines and they're all overlapping, it has this kind of weird electric effect when you look at it. It's kind of surreal looking. So I just really enjoyed drawing with it, for one thing, but I also love the way that the pictures look. They have this kind of strange quality about them. So I was sharing these pictures on social media, and I think, probably some of the comments as I was sharing them was, are you going to draw a book like this? Because I would, normally I share drawings at pen and ink and watercolor. That's what I've been doing for almost my whole career at this point. So it was a different thing for me to share these ballpoint pen drawings. And, a couple people here and there would ask, is this something for your next book? Are you working on some illustrations with this pen and this style? And it just so happened the next book that I was going to start, 102, had this sort of surreal, fantasy, strange quality about the story. And I was like, this would be, if I wanted to do this would be the perfect time to give it a go. So because I'd never done a book in that style, I had to draw a bunch of the characters and some scenes in this style and share it with my publisher and be like, would you guys be cool if I changed it up on this book and we did it like this? So, and it ended up working out. They were there was some hesitancy at first about sort of the realness of some of the critters in the book, like the bugs and the mice. They were drawn really realistically. And those can be things that puts people off, mice and vermin, mice and bugs in your house. So I sort of ended up stylizing them where they're not quite, there's, the fur and sort of the legs and stuff of the bugs. They're realistic, but their faces are a little softer. They're a little more stylized, almost slightly cartoonish. So they're not quite as off-putting to people that might have those aversions to pests, I suppose, in your house.
Yeah. That's so interesting to me, because to me they are really realistic. But when I hear you talk about it, I see those subtle differences now. But at the time when I was reading it, they felt really realistic to me. Really fascinating. How those minor touches can just make a difference for a picture book. So
yeah, I mean, one of the things that just really easily change things is that we humans, we have whites in our eyes, but mice and crickets, they just have solid dark eyes. And so a way that I really kind of softened, almost humanized these animal critter characters is I gave them eyes like ours. And it really just quickly changed it, because you could see like the way the pupil is moving left or right. You could change the way that some of their expressions just by changing that very simple detail. So if you look at the mouse drawings in 102, you'll see that these mice they look a little more people-like, because just for that simple reason, I just changed the eyes, and it really helps to make them softer, a little more relatable, I think.
Well, so now we have to know, how many pens did it take you to finish the whole book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wasn't counting at first, and I was just kind of tossing them in the bin, as they ran out. But I think someone started asking me, like, I don't know if it was my editor, my art director, how many pens I was using, and maybe we could put that somewhere, or it might be a question people ask. And so I started counting, and so I don't have the perfectly accurate, but it's somewhere around 20. We actually put a little note somewhere in the book. I forget where, like in the art notes or something. I think we said 16 or 17. So I kind of rounded down a little bit, but I think it was probably closer to 20, if not more, of those pens. But they were only, I used pretty much one type of pen. I used some different ones if I needed some different colors, but I used sort of one brand that I could buy a pack of 3 for like $5, I think. So
Wow.
it was really on an affordable art tool.
Which color ink would end up being used up first?
Definitely the dark blue, because this book takes place at night and the backgrounds have a lot of that dark blue color, like a navy blue. The ones where you see just a complete darkness is if you're reading the book and you're just flipping through the pages, you probably wouldn't even notice this. You would just think, oh, that's black. But it's actually a layering of multiple colors. So even on the cover, this dark background it would start out like light blue and then purple and pink, and then it ends with almost this very dark navy blue. I think sometimes if I really wanted it to be rich and dark, I would also put some black in there, like on the very, very last layer. But that dark blue was the one that really, it needed a lot of coverage, had a lot of surface area. So that was the one that would get zapped out the most.
Well, I have to ask you this. So like I'm a doodler, just if I'm like on a call or something and I'll have my pen and I'll just start sort of like, running my pen back and forth in the exact same spot, right? And so sometimes it pokes a hole through the page. Mm-hmm. So were you ever really deep in one of these illustrations and then, maybe like the pen pushed through the paper or it started to leave an indentation, or did anything like that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I never drew through the paper. I draw on a sort of a heavier paper. If I were to draw on, your average printer paper or whatever that most people use for offices or home use, it probably would have, ripped through because it's so much friction. But I use a heavier paper, but it definitely digs in. I mean, it's like by the time I'm done, you can see lots, because a ballpoint pen is it's a lot of pushing, especially when you're drawing over and over and over, like you said. So if you to look at these drawings up close, they have a lot of texture by the end, and it's a kind of a cool thing that you'll never see just looking at the book, but it really changes the surface of the paper. And I think you mentioned this earlier, but these pens also, the brand that I chose, they have a smell. The inks have a scent, and they're all, these pens are really for a younger audience. I don't think they're for 50-year-old man like me, but the ink smell like candies, which, I can appreciate that as well. So the light blue, for instance, smells like cotton candy. The pink smells like strawberry candy. The black smells like licorice, like black licorice, and so on, Brown's chocolate. And so as I'm drawing these, you don't really smell it so much. If you were to just like be writing your name on the paper, you wouldn't smell it so much. But because I'm making so much coverage with these drawings, it's a lot of smell, and it's like coming up off the paper as I'm drawing, which really does, it added to the strangeness of this whole story and this whole experience. But the sad part about that, though, is that it only lasts about a day. That scent only stays on the paper for about a day, and then it's just gone. But while I was drawing it, for sure, it was like this sensory experience of creating the drawing and seeing it, but also smelling it. It was a very different thing for me.
When I was reading it, I had visions of Brian Selznick's The Invention of Hugo Cabret. Yeah. And then also, like, through the story arc, I was getting, Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are vibes. And then people might throw rocks at me, but I don't think I've ever read Tuesday by David Weisner. But basically, these are all Caldecott winning books. And when I was reading 102, those were the books that kept sort of like, I guess, popping up in my mind. So, nobody ever knows what the future holds, and nobody ever knows what's going to be a Caldecott pick or whatnot. But, I have to imagine that this is such a unique process that you took. And the fact that I have visions of those kind of titles as I'm reading 102, at the very least, it's going to be on people's mock Caldecott lists, right? And so let's say it's so highly successful. My wish for you is that when they do a reprint, that maybe they make it a little scratch and sniff somewhere where there's some of the pen scents that you can scratch and sniff to like a special celebration copy that's scratch and sniff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's very kind. I mean, yeah, that would be awesome if they had some kind of technology they could add. It's something that now that you mentioned that, it would have been a fun marketing thing too, to hand out some stickers that has art of the book with little scratchable smells. Yeah. But I mean, I definitely probably, in my mind, I'm sure I must have been channeling all the artists you mentioned use a similar drawing technique, which is cross-hatching. And they're all very surreal, Wiesner, Selznick, Sendak, even, Chris Van Allsburg, all these like Polar Express, all these strange stories told in these very, very sort of lot of dramatic lighting in their art, and so there had to have been parts of me that were just like, bringing these great illustrators into this book. Once I zoned in on that style, because I did have this earlier style where I was drawing the book the way that I've done a lot of my other books with pen and ink and watercolor, and it was just as soon as I started drawing with this cross-hatching, I was like, what, I should really think about what can I do with the light, because this is at night and there's a lot of drama in this book. So I wanted to have a lot of, really dark scenes with like extreme lighting. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Italian painter Caravaggio, who had these really dramatic paintings with like almost black backgrounds with like battle scenes and like, medical things with happening, very graphic and gory things at times. And it was just like this light was just beaming in, and it was just it made the experience of looking at these paintings so eerie and strange. And so, definitely channeling a lot of different influences while working on this book. It was so much fun for me to just do lots of different things.
I'm always fascinated with artists that can make things feel like they're glowing. I've talked about it with, I think, like David Lichtfield. And, I just think it's such a special talent to be able to do that. And I was thinking as I was reading 102 that the fact that you were able to pull off with just pen, that you made things glow, and it was more of sort of, I guess, pulling back in areas and not using any pen at all and just allowing the white space to do the work. And I did find that really clever, and I want you to know that I noticed. So wow. Was there challenges with that, or like how did you go about making sure that you left enough space for that glow?
Yeah, I think it's just years and years of drawing, After a while, it's just sort of an intuitive action. The same with the color, because I'm sort of blending the colors in real time. So I can, anyone can do this. It just takes time to study things. And, color theory is like, you just need to know what colors mix to become other colors. And some of it's simple, but it gets a little more complicated when you get into like browns and like things that are a little more, that require 3 or 4 different colors to build up to make different individual colors. But it's the same thing with like shading and light. it's just years and years of drawing, and you don't even really think about it too much. I don't think about it too much at this stage in my life. I just sort of know how much pressure to put on things to make things darker, and how light to draw things. How, like you said, to leave the paper is what creates the light, the white of the paper. So you just it's just all part of my programming at this point. But yeah, it's interesting though too, also because when I was making this book, an interesting thing I discovered was I thought, a lot of things with pen and ink, it's just drawing something in one color in black. And so I go and do lots of school visits, and I also do like little art workshops with kids, and I do little drawing demos and drawing workshops, and we can all draw in one color, pen or pencil line drawings. That's very simple. Simple, to some, whatever it is we're drawing. But I was thinking about this multicolored pen drawing process, and I wondered, is this something that I could do with kids? Are they going to be able to figure this out? And I wasn't really going to do it, but then I had an art teacher at a school that I visited who asked me to try it with her fourth graders, I think it was. So I was like, okay, yeah, we can try it. I don't know if they'll be able to pick it up, but I thought, well, we'll start with something simple. We'll draw an apple. So an apple's almost one color. It's red, but it's got some yellow. It's got some green in it. And so we put it on like a projector so everyone could see the same thing, and we drew it together. And I drew it, and I was sort of explaining how I start with the lightest color, and then I build and get darker and darker. And by the time this little drawing session was over, I was walking around looking at the drawings, and I was just blown away by how beautiful their drawings were. How just right away they picked up this technique, So kids, even though they haven't done something, they're very brave about, not all kids, every kid's different, but they're very curious. They want to try new things. These fourth graders just picked it up immediately. These made these beautiful drawings using the same technique that I was using for this book. And so it was such a pleasant surprise for me kids are always surprising me in ways like that. And that's why I love that children are my audience. I love hanging out with kids. It's just such a breath of fresh air to be in their presence so many times. But when that happened, I was just like, I was so happy to be proven wrong that this is something that they could do,
Yeah, I love that. And just thank you for making the time to visit in schools, because it does make such a difference. I think for them to change up their days and have somebody who they can look up to and be inspired by. And I mean, I'm sure you've had it where you go into those school visits, and then as either you're leaving or the classroom is, in single file walking past you, and then one of them stops and tells you, I'm going to be an illustrator, I'm going to be an author. And I just feel like that's so electrifying to know that you helped create that energy for that kid. And so thanks for showing up for them.
Yeah, of course. One of my favorite things.
Well, you've talked before about wanting every book to have a surprise and a callback at the end. So a phrase or moment from early on that returns and means something different by the last page. So 1 or 2 is a recurring number in the book. So by date, October 2 is the date. We see it on the clock. Talk to me about that callback and whatever you're willing to share about what that number means by the last page.
Yeah, so the story started as just like a little nugget of a story idea. I wanted to just make like an animal rescue story, like an animal gets in the house or around the house, and someone in the family helps to rescue or save an injured animal or a trapped animal. And so it started like that, but in my mind, it wasn't enough to make a book. It could be, it's a simple story. It's a story of kindness and helping someone, but I needed to kind of build on that. So I started to think, well, maybe it's a mouse, and then the mouse is there's something wrong with the mouse. And then I started to think, well, the child that's saving it, maybe there's something wrong with that child too. And so I thought maybe that he or she at that point, he could be sick. And I was thinking, well, I want them to be sick, but I still want them to be able to do stuff, because like if you're really sick, you're going to be in bed all day. So I started to think of, in terms of numbers, like maybe he's 100 degrees. He has a fever of 100 or 101, or I started to get up to like 103. And I was thinking that's too high, that's a little too, as a parent, that's kind of scary territory when your kid gets really high temperatures. So I thought maybe we'll start like at 102. And 102 felt like an interesting number because it's 3 different numbers. It's not 101, I feel like it's a little too not sick, 103 is a little too sick. So 102 was like right there in the middle. And so I started thinking like, well, this could be a fun thing to help me get from one point of the story to the next, because we measure a lot of things. Numbers have a lot of different meanings. They can measure time, they can measure date, they can measure, quantity. Like I said, sick, temperature, age, numbers have so many different uses in our lives that I can use that number and I can keep bringing it up, and it will help me to build the story, but it will also make it even kind of stranger, because you start asking yourself as the reader, why does this number keep showing up? And so it's never really explained why that number keeps showing up. And I don't think it needs to be explained really. It's just there's coincidences in life that happen. And it makes the story all the stranger because you're seeing it in all these different ways, in all these different parts of the story. They're almost like chapters of the story. And so it became this building device, but it also became this way of hiding things in the story. And kids really enjoy looking for little hidden things, hidden messages, hidden Easter eggs throughout the pictures, throughout the text. So I was also hiding the number in the background in different ways. So it just became this really playful thing. And so by the end, there's this twist at the end where it's like, I use it one more time and it's like, something that I think nobody really will ever see coming when you're reading it for the first time. So I thought it was a fun way to tie it off,
I thought it was very clever. And so there's even a 102 bean soup, which is, such a specific number that it's almost sort of an absurd level of detail for a recipe on a picture book.
Mm-hmm.
That there's these characters that are trying to make a 102 bean soup. So I love the bean end papers. And while I didn't count every single bean that you have pictured and labeled in the end papers, I have to imagine there's exactly 102 there, right?
Yeah. There's 51 on the front end papers and 51 on the back. So there's only probably 10 or 15 different beans in the world. I looked it up and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to make some up. So I had a lot of fun with it. I named some beans after my family members, some of my artistic heroes. I named some after different characters in books and movies that I like. And I think, my editor got a bean and my art director got a bean. My literary agent got a bean. I was like just going wild with it because I had so many opportunities to come up with bean names. So it was a lot of fun.
Children, as you mentioned just before, they're often so open to being curious. And I think because of that curiosity, there's such a great level of potential for creativity. And I just think that, like you said, they're the best and most inspiring audience. And George in 102 is sort of driven into this whole adventure purely by curiosity. And he is following a cricket through a crack in the wall in the middle of the night. Did you think of George as a stand-in for that kind of sort of pure, uncomplicated curiosity that you love in kids?
Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about kids is that they're seekers. They're so curious that there's almost like a fearlessness at times when you're that curious and you want to answer questions, and you'll take, more risks in order to do that at times. So I think, that's one of our faults, I think, as we get older, is that some of that curiosity kind of like peels away. And I like to try to encourage curiosity wherever I go, whoever I'm speaking to, even in schools where kids are already just bursting with curiosity. But I try to like impress upon them that there's going to be a time in your life as you get older where you think you know all the answers. We adults have this sort of boring way about us where we think we know everything, and we stop seeking, we stop learning, and it's really ridiculous because there's so much. We will die having known so very little if you think about the vastness of the world. That I just try to impress upon kids to stay curious, hold on to that curiosity for your entire life, because even as you get older and you start figuring things out, there's still so much left. There's still so much to discover about different people, different cultures, different places, different parts of nature. The entire world is just full of impossibilities, that I just find myself as an adult just finding new things to obsess over all the time. That's why I love drawing stories and writing stories about kids, is because they're living in that very powerful time of life where they want to find out things, they want to discover things, and it changes them as a person as they do it. And so, George is one of those. He's one of those beings that these crazy things are happening, and it just kind of makes him want to know more. It starts out with there's just like a little cricket on his chest, and then one thing leads to another, and he shrinks down to the size of a mouse. And this doesn't like stop him. He's like, if we're a grown up, we would be like freaking out and like, oh, how am I going to get normal again? He's just like on to the next thing. So that's the beauty of telling stories with children as your main characters, is that they're just going to keep going. They want to find out why things are happening instead of like how to, they're not going to be paralyzed because of that moment. So at least in my mind, in my stories, they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as much as you love the work that you do, I know your favorite thing in the world is being a dad, going to your kids' concerts and plays and school programs and exploring the world together. And I think your kids are 17 and 13 now. And any parent knows that our kids get older faster and faster every year. Does that make its way into a book like 102 or any of your books? It's because I feel like the story 102, as much as it's about George, it's also about a parent or a parent figure, like there's mom at the beginning, and no spoilers from me, but, showing up for a child in a small, specific way. But, do you think sometimes some of your thoughts as a parent and holding on to your kids and, combined with what you just shared about, staying curious and how we love that about kids, like what element of you as being a parent do you think shows up in your art and your stories?
Yeah, I think a lot of my books have sort of family-centric themes in different ways. I did a book called King Alice that was about a dad and a daughter, and it's a snowy day, and they're stuck inside, and they make a book together. So they draw and write this story together, and it kind of leads their entire day. So by the end of the day, they have a finished book, and then they read the book together. But it's all this kind of crazy hijinks, and it's a humorous story. And that was based on the dynamics of creating things with my kids, and it being sort of exhausting, but at the same time, it's so validating and inspiring. And so a lot of my books are about, how I feel as a dad, as a parent, and how rich that has made my life. And also about, what how the children, just incredible things and funny things and unusual things that children do and say. And so that's where a lot of my stories have started, just by being inspired by family and how important that is to me. I did even, this was we have a 17-year-old now who's a senior in high school, who's going to be going off to college. And it's like so hard for me and my wife to think about that. It's going to be difficult, but it's very bittersweet because it's exciting to see them take on this new chapter of their lives, but it's also a separation. So that part is very sad to us. But I wrote a book well before this, and as a parent, you think about this time that's ultimately going to happen at some point. I made a book called Dream, which is a very sort of emotional book. I think it's it's a book for families, or in some ways parents, to read. And it's about watching a child grow up. They're gorillas, and so the gorilla is thriving, and then has some challenges and things, and then it goes off. And it's about sort of this full experience of parenthood and seeing that child go off and do something else, evolve and become an adult, his or herself, in life. And so, yeah, family, it's such a big part of my life. And there's no one in my life that's closer to me than my wife and kids. We're just a very close-knit group. And so it's been a big inspiration for me as a creator. And it's like the perfect place to express that is in picture books. As an artist, to be able to express your big feelings about family and about children is in this medium. So
yeah, so beautiful. Well, since you talked about birding and that you're a birder, so I mean, birding has to be a really patient activity.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be very observational. You're watching and waiting for something wild to reveal itself on its own terms. And I can't help to sort of see that parallel of that, watching and waiting for something to reveal itself, as also when you're a creator and trying to develop a story. So do you think that same kind of attention is what shows up in how you build a page and your stories?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. There are certain things that I can be really patient about. I feel like overall I'm a generally patient person, and I like to look like birding. I like the slow process of it, and because when you do have a success, whether that be in different areas, whether that success be a drawing that you've been working on for days, or a bird that you've been looking for a couple hours, and you see one, it is a very patient process. And so it's such a special moment by the time that success happens, that it's all the more powerful. That success it's just more potent, I think, than like an immediate success. And so I think part of my wiring that allows me or helps me to be patient in those ways, because I want that long sought success to happen, so I can just kind of like take my time, and I know that it's going to feel good at the end. But there are some things I can be really impatient about, like stressful things. I think, like if you lose your car keys and you have no idea where they are in the house, and you're just like, I get like paralyzed with frustration and like impatient. I just don't want to look for that thing, which is it's kind of funny in a way, because I love looking for like this bird in the forest that takes forever to find. But like, I just really hate like looking for like a lost item in my house, like that I need, in order to get to the next thing that I need to do. But I think generally speaking, I kind of enjoy things that take time, just because it builds an experience around it, instead of just like drawing something and it's like there, quickly, and then you just, instant validation. It just doesn't feel quite as special. So I think it's made me a more patient person.
I had a book title pop into my head for Cornbread and Poppy and the Lost Thing, because I would love to see how they sort of manage through trying to, find something lost, because they would, both have such a different approach to it. Well, I couldn't help but notice that your gorgeous book, Evergreen, was a quest to deliver soup to Granny Oak.
Right.
And 102 is a quest to help make a 102 bean soup for a sick mouse. So 2 soup quests have come up for you.
Yeah.
Is that coincidence or an unconscious theme? Or is there something about delivering soup that keeps pulling you back?
I don't have like a soup obsession, but I do like a good soup. And I think soup is it's sort of a natural companion to ailment, and it's not like a miracle remedy. It's just sort of like a natural thing that we all want when we're sick in some ways. So it started with the ailment. That was kind of the thing that was happening in both stories for me. But I started to think about numbers, and I thought about this, how you can go to the grocery store and buy like a pack and it's called like a 32 bean soup or something like that, And then I was like, maybe I could do like a 102 bean soup. And then I was thinking, there was sort of a hesitancy at first, because I was like, do I want to do another big soup moment in another book? But I just thought, whatever, it'll be fun, and I'll use it in a different way. And I guess a little bit more about the beans than it was the soup, but it was the number of the beans and like that sort of that detail. But yeah, I think it just became this thing where it was like, it's almost like these parallels between Evergreen and 102, but sometimes that's okay, I think,
Totally different stories, but both, both of them warm the heart like a good cup of soup.
Yeah, and I think they're both sort of they're both sort of cozy. They're cozy stories, So I think soup just has a natural cozy vibe. So it just kind of reappeared, because of all those reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't not mention your other new book, which is Starman, a picture book biography of David Bowie. So I'd love to know, just kind of in a nutshell, what drew you to Bowie as a subject?
For years, most of my career has been fiction writing and illustrating. And then I was inspired to write a picture book biography about one of my personal and artistic heroes, Mr. Rogers, who was a children's programming creator. And I enjoyed that process so much that I was thinking I would like to do that again. I would like to do another biography about another hero, another artistic hero. And almost very quickly, David Bowie just popped up into my head. And there's so many different things I admire about him. I love how he changed his style so often. His sound, he would change it so often throughout his artistic career. He did all these different styles from one album to the next, different sounds, jazz. That's always inspired me about artists who will, instead of working continuously on the same style for their life's work, just pause and keep trying different things. And so I always loved that about him. But I love his music, of course. And he was such an interesting person. He had, very highs in his life. He had some lows in his life as well. And he had this sort of intergalactic vibe about him. A lot of the themes that came up in his lyrics were about space travel and things of that nature that made him seem sort of alien-like. And so he's just such a fascinating story. His story is so fascinating. His presence was so big, and so I knew that I wanted Bowie to be my subject of my next biography. So I really had a lot of fun playing with it because Bowie was so unorthodox. The story is not a straight biography. I mean, it is. It's more of an artistic biography where it tells him as this space traveler. and he's going to all these different planets. And as he goes from one planet to the next, he's inspired by the different things that are happening on each planet. And it changes the way that he makes his art. And then he moves on to find something else. And then he moves to the next planet to find something else. So it was such a fun, it was kind of a departure because I started out writing it as a typical biography, but it evolved into this sort of alien biography in a way where he's like exploring the universe, which is kind of what he did. I mean, he just explored so much, and everything that he sought out and found would find its way into his music and his art and his sound. And so each different planet that he visits is a different part of the book. And the way that I made those pictures is different in each part of the book. So one part is collage, and one part is colored pencil, and one part is watercolor. So it was so much fun to make. And that book will be out in the fall, so in September. So it's right on the horizon.
I kind of love that you've gone from this, pen-only book to this other book that has such a variety of different art in it. And, it's
Right.
probably like you probably needed to do that after spending so much time with the scented pens.
Yeah. It's fun to just kind of jump around at this point because I feel like I've discovered some different ways of making things, and it's refreshing to do something in one way and then maybe go back to the way that I was doing it and then return back to another way. I just find it's so much more fun to just explore and dip into different worlds. And sometimes, like in the Bowie book, there's some crossover. So there's a lot of pen and ink, black ink drawing, line drawing. But I did actually, in some of the backgrounds, I found ways to use that same scented colored pen with the space backgrounds. It kind of made it more electric, the darkness of space, where I overlapped a lot of those lines, those colored crosshatch lines. So yeah, like I said, it's like, I feel like life is just a constant reveal, it's a constant exploration. So why should we limit ourselves to one way of creating or one way of understanding something when our minds could be constantly opened bigger and bigger and bigger? So it's just refreshing to work that way as well.
I feel like we could end right there. That was so perfect. But we're going to go full circle.
Yeah.
If a kid closes 102 and keeps only one feeling from it, not a plot point, just a feeling, what do you hope that is?
I mean, not to keep repeating myself, but just, I want them to just keep exploring, keep finding things out.
Yep. Curiosity. And for the grown-ups listening on that sort of topic of curiosity and also the incuriosity that can come from being an adult, is there something that you'd want a tired, distracted adult reading this book aloud at bedtime to notice that they might otherwise read right past?
That's a good question. I think I would probably say, I think there are things in the papers that's where the different beans are illustrated at the beginning and the very end of the book. I think if a grown-up were to look through that, an artistically inclined grown-up, they would see lots of names of things that they might recognize. So I would say linger there if you could, no matter how tired you might be.
And is there a moment from making this book, so not from the story itself, just from the actual days of making it, that you think you'll still remember 5 years from now? And maybe after everybody's stopped talking about only using a pen.
Yeah. I think I'll always remember the experience of creating George, because George is modeled after my son Dean when he was about that age. And so it was a very father-son shared experience where I took lots of pictures of Dean and he became the pictures of George. Dean was a little too old by the time when I started writing the story, he was about the right age for George. But because these things take so long to bring into existence, he was a few years too old when I started drawing the final pictures. So I still took a bunch of pictures of Dean, and then I just kind of shrank him down a little bit onto the page. But I'll always remember the time we shared where I was taking all these pictures of him, because, it wasn't, not to gloss it over, it wasn't always a pleasant experience, not to try to get my son to like focus. And so he enjoyed knowing that he was going to be the subject of the book, the visual subject, but he wanted to do something else, So I actually ended up paying him. He was my paid model. But it was such a fun thing, and to just be able to turn Dean into George. And I think, he's proud of that too. He really enjoys that this book it was hard for him in the early days to he was like, why isn't he named Dean? He would get all angry about that. But I was like, well, that's a little too like on the nose, I want to make it a little ambiguous, but I'll always remember that we spent.
It's so beautiful. All right. Absolute final last question. Of everything we talked about today, if there was just one thing that you want our listeners to take away, what would that be?
I would say try something new, something. If you haven't drawn in 20 years, sit down and make a drawing. Or if you haven't been on a trail or a forest preserve since you were a child, just go for a walk. Because whenever I do something like that, sometimes the answer is that I don't like this, it's confirmation of that. But sometimes I'm really surprised by how special that is. If I try something new, or watch a movie that I don't think that I would like, or pick up a book that I didn't think was relatable to me in some way. So I think, just try something new, on this day or the next day that you're listening to this, just try one new thing and see where it takes you. Because I think we get into these patterns where we do the same thing and we know the same things, but there's so much to understand and broaden and expand ourselves by doing that. It's endless, so try something new. It can only lead to good things, I think.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for this conversation, for trusting a scented ballpoint pen to become a whole book. And 102 is such a tender, strange, wonderful little book. And I'm so glad we got to talk about it. Congratulations on it and on STARMAN. I can't wait for listeners to get their hands on both. So just a huge thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bianca. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us on this quest for growing readers. Sometimes the most meaningful work comes from staying open to the unexpected. A pen you weren't supposed to use, a question you didn't expect to be asked. Matt's reminder to stay curious is one I hope stays with you as much as it will stay with me. And be sure to check the show notes for a link to get your own copy of 102, along with a link to Matt's website, MatthewCordell.com, where you can explore more of his work. And if this episode brought a little curiosity, warmth, or wonder into your day, I'd love for you to help us grow this show. Subscribe to the Growing Readers podcast wherever you're listening. Leave us a rating or a review, and share this episode with a fellow reader, parent, teacher, or librarian who you think would enjoy it. Every subscribe, every share, every review helps more people find their way to conversations and books like this one. Thanks again for spending time with us, and until next time, keep growing readers. The Growing Readers podcast is a production of the Children's Book Review. For more outstanding books like Matthew Cordell's 102, I hope you'll visit us at thechildrensbookreview.com.